Imagine a field so quiet that even the wind dares not breathe. The wheat, still and silver beneath the moonlight, stands like an audience holding its breath. Then, without warning, a flash. A sharp, cold pulse slices through the night. No thunder follows. No aircraft breaks the sky. Just light, raw, white and wrong. And then it is gone. But something remains. Not in the air. Not on the ground. But inside you, like a frequency you were never meant to hear. And when you look again, the earth is marked. Don't forget to like and share this story with your friends or closest family members to help spread awareness and caution through storytelling. May you receive great rewards for subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing this story. Now let's continue with the story. The summer of 1996 was dry. Dust clung to the edges of boots and tires, and the sun burned over Wiltshire without mercy. While tourists and researchers flooded Silbury Hill, drawn to the elaborate crop circle that had stirred headlines across the country, something else was brewing just east of it. Something quieter. Something colder. Cherhill Down, with its sloping chalk hills and silence, lay just beyond the media's gaze. For the people who lived near its edge, the fields were simply part of the landscape, unchanging, unimpressive. Until that night, Daniel Ward adjusted his telescope beneath a cloudless sky. He had driven up the narrow trail behind the hill to escape the scattered lights of town. His routine was always the same. Set up the scope. Align it to Jupiter. Record positions. Take notes. Nothing ever changed. Until everything did. At exactly 2:13 in the morning, his telescope's view shimmered. Then failed. Not from fog. Not from clouds. It was as if something invisible had passed between him and the heavens. And then the flash came. No sound. No wind. Just a burst of raw light that blinked out before he could even blink. Daniel staggered back, his vision swimming. The air had a strange pressure, as though something large had moved nearby without touching the ground. He waited. Nothing else came. He packed up and left, shaken but unsure of what had happened. The next morning, the field below was changed. A swirling pattern had appeared in the wheat. But it was unlike anything Daniel, or anyone else, had ever seen. Not circular. Not geometric. It looked broken. Fractured, like a spiral interrupted mid-turn. Lines curved inward, then split, then curved again. It was hypnotic and wrong. Word spread fast but not far. The formation didn't make the papers. It didn't make the radio. Silbury's perfect pattern still dominated attention. But those who came to see the Cherhill design noticed something odd right away. The stalks weren't crushed. They were bent. Sharply, cleanly, as though softened and shaped by an unseen force. Their nodes, those small joints in the stalks, were swollen unnaturally. In some places, the wheat looked as if it had grown in impossible directions overnight. Then came Dr. Eliza Holborn. A geophysicist from a nearby university, she had been mapping soil conductivity for an unrelated study. When she crossed into the field's perimeter, her instruments began to misbehave. The readings spiked erratically. Microwave disturbances. Minor but identical to the interference detected days earlier at Silbury Hill. Only here they were unstable. The signal danced, then faded. Within a week it was gone. She returned twice. The readings had vanished. The field was silent again. Daniel, however, had not moved on. He found himself replaying that moment under the stars. The silence, the pressure, the light. And then, a week later, his telescope began acting strangely. Static bled into his recordings, even when disconnected from any source. He thought he was imagining things. Until, late one night, as he cataloged stars in his shed, his old shortwave radio flicked on by itself. It hummed with a low tone, a vibration that felt more felt than heard. He stared at the machine. It should not have been plugged in. And the sound, it pulsed. Not a message, not a voice, but a rhythm. Then silence. He told no one. Not yet. The following days were wrapped in stillness, but not the comforting kind. It was the stillness of something watching, of the air holding its breath. Daniel Ward returned to Cherhill Down, drawn not by duty or science, but by a feeling he could not explain. Something had changed in him after the flash, something deeper than fear. The pattern in the field remained, unmoved, untouched by weather or wildlife. Local farmers avoided the area, not out of superstition, but because their machinery kept malfunctioning whenever they came near. One tractor's engine had stalled entirely at the edge of the pattern. When the farmer restarted it, the dashboard lights blinked erratically before returning to normal, as if the machine had passed through a pulse of electricity. Daniel stood at the perimeter again, camera in hand. From the slope above, the design was even more bizarre. It wasn't just fractured, it looked unfinished, as though an idea had been left hanging mid-thought. Spirals broke into abrupt angles and smaller, needle-thin lines darted away from the main formation, scattering like veins. To Daniel it didn't seem random. It felt deliberate. A message maybe. But one written in a language no one could read. That night, he stayed later than usual, pacing the edges of the field, trying to draw the design in his notebook from memory. Around midnight he felt the temperature drop. Not the usual evening chill, but sudden, unnatural cold like walking into a freezer. He looked up. Above the field, a thin line of light hovered silently. Not a beam. Not a spotlight. A line as if something invisible had traced the air with silver. It curved, matching the angles in the field below, then blinked out. Daniel stumbled backward, breath short. His chest was tight as if something inside him had been pulled toward the sky. He waited. Nothing moved. But when he turned to leave, his wristwatch had stopped. The second hand was stuck, ticking but not moving forward. At home, he found his radio had recorded something, an automatic capture from its silent overnight monitoring. It was a faint audio clip, no more than 5 seconds long. A low vibration. Then a clicking sound like a counter resetting. And at the end, a frequency spike that nearly broke the speakers. He saved the clip under one word: origin. A few days later, Dr. Holborn returned to Cherhill Down. Not as part of her survey, she hadn't told her department. This was personal now. The data she had collected didn't make sense. The microwave signatures had resembled a short-lived burst of directed energy, like the kind used in signal testing. But no known source could generate that pattern over open farmland. She brought a portable magnetometer and a thermal camera. As she approached the field, she noticed something that hadn't been there before. In the soil just outside the formation, a series of shallow impressions, circles. Not crop circles, but soil depressions, as if something with narrow, circular feet had pressed into the earth with great weight, yet left no other trace. The impressions were evenly spaced, mechanical, precise. At the center of the formation, she found the air warmer than expected. Not by much, just 2 degrees. But the change was enough to register on her sensor. A heat anomaly. In a field that had not seen sunlight in hours. She took samples and left. That night her data drive failed. All her scans. All her maps. Corrupted. She didn't return. The following week, a dog went missing. Then 2. Locals whispered but said nothing officially. The radio in Daniel's shed activated once more. This time it emitted not just a hum, but what sounded like breathing, long mechanical breaths as though something were listening back. Daniel knew he had to speak to someone. He uploaded the audio and posted it anonymously to a message board for amateur astronomers. The post read, "Event recorded, Cherhill Down, 2:13 a.m. Frequency spike. Is anyone else hearing this?" No replies. But the post received 27 views in under an hour. Then it vanished. When Daniel tried to repost it, the website displayed an error. Thread no longer exists. That night, the line of light returned. But this time it moved. Slowly. Deliberately. Following the edge of the chalk hill. The day after the light moved across the chalk ridge, Daniel Ward found tire tracks near his usual stargazing spot. Tracks that didn't belong to him or any local farmer. They were wide, heavy, and curved in a slow arc across the grass, ending abruptly at the edge of the field. No footprints. No signs of turning back. Just arrival and disappearance. His camera, which he had left hidden in the hedgerow, was still recording. He had set it up the night before, hoping to capture a glimpse of the moving light. The footage ran cleanly until 2:12 a.m. Then it glitched. For 6 full seconds, the screen turned white with faint vertical bands of black. When the image returned, the frame had shifted by nearly 10 meters, without the tripod ever having moved. It was as though space itself had warped and snapped back into place. That same morning, Daniel found a burned patch of grass near the crop formation. Not scorched, but seared just enough to leave a smooth, circular black stain the size of a dinner plate. The center of the circle was caved in slightly, the earth hardened like kiln-fired clay. He touched it. It was warm. Farther away in the village of Caen, 12 kilometers from Cherhill Down, strange reports began surfacing. Birds circling one area in the woods for hours without landing. Dogs refusing to go near specific footpaths. Power flickers in homes that never lost service. None of it was enough to draw official attention. But the locals began speaking to each other in hushed tones again. The farmers remembered the summer of 1978, another year when the wheat bowed to invisible hands and the skies flashed without thunder. Daniel drove to Cannes that evening to visit an old friend, Clara Benton, who ran the town's archives from a small, crumbling library near the train station. Clara had always kept an eye on the odd stories, the kind that never made it into newspapers but passed down through police logs, village rumors, and forgotten letters. When Daniel told her about the light, the pulses, and the corrupted images, she didn't blink. She simply walked to a locked cabinet and removed a thin file labeled Hollow Sweep, 1978. Inside were photographs, black and white, grainy. One showed a similar pattern in the fields near Cherhill Down, though less fractured, more circular. Another was a thermal scan taken by military personnel. A cold zone in the center. Heat signatures around the edges. The last image was of a man, blurred face, standing alone in the center of the formation. He vanished 2 days later, Clara said. No search party. No funeral. The report was stamped resolved, but no body was found. Daniel leaned back, a chill crawling up his spine. Clara handed him another sheet. A scanned letter written by a farmer's wife that same year. The ink was smudged, but the final line was clear. They come to learn not to speak. They come where we cannot see them coming. Daniel asked to borrow the file. Clara hesitated, then nodded. But be careful, Daniel, she said quietly. This place, it remembers. That night, Daniel didn't return home. Instead, he parked just beyond the eastern ridge of Cherhill Down and waited. He brought no telescope, no radio, just a notepad and his camera. The stars were unusually sharp. No clouds, no wind, a clean, silent sky, until 2:13. A hum began not from any device but from the ground. A soft, resonant vibration that traveled up his spine. The field ahead shimmered, not with light, but with motion, waves in the air like heat ripples. Then he saw it. Figures, tall, narrow silhouettes moving along the outer edge of the pattern. They did not walk. They glided. No footsteps. No sound. Just motion. Daniel held his breath. The figures paused, 3 of them, at the far side of the formation. Then together they turned their heads. Not toward each other. Toward him. The hum stopped, and the camera shut off. Daniel did not remember driving home. When he awoke, his car was parked haphazardly in his driveway, the front tires half off the gravel. His notebook sat on the passenger seat, untouched. But the camera, his most reliable companion, was missing. His hands trembled as he stepped into the house. The hallway felt colder than usual. Not cold like air, but cold like absence. The kind that creeps into the bones of a house after something has been taken from it. He checked the time. It was just past 7 in the morning. He had been gone for 5 hours. He had no memory of those hours. Only one thing was certain. They had seen him, and he had seen them. That evening Clara called. Her voice was tight, words short, as though she were speaking through clenched teeth. Daniel, someone came to the library this morning, she said. Tall man. Well, no ID. Asked for the Hollow Sweep file. I told him it was under review. He didn't argue. Just watched me. Daniel's pulse quickened. Did he say anything else? No, she replied. But he left this. She paused. Then, as if reluctant, continued. A photograph of you. From last night. Standing beside your car. Daniel's mind reeled. No one else had been there. No other cars. No sounds. But someone had watched from the darkness. Not just watched, documented him. Clara, listen. Do not go back to the down. Not for anything. But she didn't answer right away. Daniel, she finally whispered, I think I already brought something back with me. The line went dead. He rushed to the library. It was closed, the lights off, the door locked. He knocked. Waited. Called her name. No response. Then he noticed something on the inside of the glass door, a smear. Oily, elongated, stretching from shoulder height to the base of the door. As though someone, or something, had slid down the glass while leaving behind a trace that didn't belong to any human skin. He left. That night the field was different. The formation had shifted again. New lines had appeared, intersections layered over the original pattern like veins on old skin. No one could have created them by hand in a single night. They bent the wheat in ways impossible to replicate. Angles so tight and smooth even the nodes seemed untouched. But something was off. In the center of the formation, a shape had emerged. A symbol. Circular, sharp, and unfamiliar. It didn't match any known language. But Daniel had seen it before, burned into one of the photographs in Clara's file. From 1978. The same shape in the same field. He took photos, careful to remain outside the pattern. But when he returned to his car, he noticed something new. His tires had sunken. Not flat. Not punctured. Sunken as if the ground beneath had softened. No melted, just enough to trap them in place. He tried the engine. Nothing. No sound. No lights. He sat in the dark, in the silence, surrounded by fields and sky and a feeling he could not shake. He was not alone. From the ridge above the hill, a shimmer flickered. A faint ripple in the darkness. Not visible to the eye but present. Felt. It moved slowly like a wave of invisible pressure, descending toward him. Daniel stayed frozen, hands on the wheel. The ripple passed behind the car. Then, the air changed. Not colder. Not warmer. But hollow. As if something had stepped out of reality and into the space beside him. He turned slowly. In the rearview mirror, nothing appeared. But when he looked into the mirror a second time, there was a figure sitting in the back seat. The figure in the rearview mirror did not move. It did not blink. It simply existed, a pale, slender silhouette with a head too still and eyes too dark to reflect light. Its presence filled the car like a vacuum, draining even the air from Daniel's lungs. He dared not turn around. His hand hovered over the ignition, but the key was useless. The engine remained dead. The dashboard lights, unlit. His breath clouded the glass, though the night wasn't cold. And behind him, the figure just watched. Daniel forced himself to blink. When his eyes reopened, the mirror was empty again. The pressure in the air eased. The silence cracked just slightly as a breeze brushed the weed outside. But his body refused to move, until he heard a sound. A soft click. It came from the back seat. He turned slowly. Nothing. But on the leather, resting exactly in the center of the back seat, lay his camera, the one that had vanished the night before. His throat tightened. He reached back with trembling fingers, pulling it forward. The screen was scratched. The lens slightly cracked. But it powered on. 6 new files. He opened the first. It showed him, standing at the edge of the pattern, staring upward, mouth slightly open. Then another, taken from directly above him, as if from 10 meters in the air. The third showed 3 shadowy figures, blurry, elongated, emerging from a shimmer in the wheat. But it was the 6th photo that stopped his heart. It was not of the field, not of the figures. It was a close-up of his own face, asleep, taken from the side of his bed. He drove home in silence. The engine started on the 4th try. The road behind him seemed longer than usual, as though it stretched beyond time, beyond space, like a corridor bending beneath unseen weight. Back at the house, the lights flickered once as he entered. The air was still. But his dog, Toby, was gone. The back door was open. And in the grass just outside, he found 2 perfect footprints, longer than a man's but narrow and pressed deeply into the soil. He followed them for 30 meters before they vanished at the edge of the woods. He called out. Nothing answered. Not even the trees. For days, Daniel locked himself inside. He blocked out the windows, unplugged every electrical device. He kept the camera hidden, buried in the shed under a slab of concrete. He told himself it was over. But it wasn't. Every night at 2:13, his watch buzzed faintly, even without a battery. And every night, just after the buzzing stopped, the radio turned on by itself. Each time it played the same tone. Pulsing. Almost like breathing. But on the 5th night, the radio spoke. Not words. A name. Daniel. What? Clear. As though whispered by something with no throat. Then silence. He returned to Clara's library. This time it was open. But Clara was not inside. Instead, a man in a brown coat sat behind the desk. His skin was pale, almost translucent. His hair thin and colorless. But it was his eyes, flat, gray and dry, that struck Daniel first. They did not reflect the light. The man looked up. "You have something that does not belong to you," he said. Daniel froze. The man's voice was soft but precise. Measured. Like someone mimicking human tone. "I don't know what you mean." The man didn't blink. "The sequence is incomplete. The cycle has not closed." Daniel stepped back. "I want to speak with Clara. She is processing." Daniel turned and left. He did not run. He walked. The air outside tasted metallic. The clouds had stilled. Not moved, stilled as if the sky itself were caught in a moment of delay. He drove home. But this time he was not trying to hide. He was ready to dig. Back in the shed, he unburied the camera. He connected it to an old laptop. The images loaded. All 6 of them. But now a 7th had appeared. It was a photo of a stone circle. Cracked, buried, half swallowed by the earth. And in the center of it, A dark hole. A shaft descending into chalk and shadow. The metadata read, origin_point_Cherhill.jpg. Taken exactly at 2:13 a.m. That night, Daniel packed a flashlight, rope, and a recorder. He was going back to Cherhill Down. This time not to watch, but to go beneath. The chalk whispered under Daniel's boots as he returned to Cherhill Down, alone, guided only by the flicker of a dying flashlight and the weight of knowing he could never unsee what was waiting for him. The field stood silent. Even the insects had gone. It was as if the land itself had recoiled, leaving only him to step forward. He followed the path along the edge of the formation, now fully transformed. The fractured pattern had deepened, with new lines etched into the soil like scars. They curved toward a point near the eastern slope, where the wheat had thinned into a circle of bare ground. At the center of that clearing was the shaft, just as the image had shown. A narrow, ancient pit, stone-lined, overgrown with moss and partially collapsed, but unmistakably man-made. Daniel knelt beside it and shone the light downward. The beam was swallowed by darkness after only 5 meters. No bottom. No reflection. Only cold, unmoving air rising from below. He pulled the rope from his pack, tied it to a rusted fence post nearby, and anchored it tight. Every instinct told him to turn back. But something deeper, a truth older than logic, pulled him downward. Hand over hand he descended into the earth. The shaft walls were rough, carved not with tools, but shaped by heat and pressure, melted stone fused with ancient chalk. Strange markings lined the interior. Not runes. Not language. Waveforms, carved as if the walls themselves had recorded sounds that had never been heard by human ears. 10 meters down, his boots hit solid ground. The tunnel opened into a chamber. It was dry, cold. The walls curved inward, smooth and seamless, like the inside of an enormous egg. Daniel's breath echoed unnaturally, returning to him distorted, as if something else breathed when he did. In the center of the chamber stood a structure, a pedestal, waist-high, with a depression in its surface the exact shape of the strange symbol that had appeared in the field. He stepped closer. There was something in the depression. A stone disc, thin and black like obsidian, but when he touched it, it was warm. His recorder hissed, then crackled, then played back a sound he hadn't recorded. A voice. Sequence reached. Transit near. Daniel froze. It was his own voice, but distorted, layered with tones that did not belong to any human throat. He stepped back. The ground trembled, subtle like the slow beat of a giant heart. The walls began to change. The waveforms glowed faintly. A hum filled the chamber. Not loud, but ancient. And in the glow, images began to rise from the walls. Not drawings. Memories. He saw figures, tall, narrow, gliding across fields that shifted with time. He saw the Silbury Hill formation, then Cherhill Down, then others, patterns across the world. Always accompanied by light. Always followed by silence. Then he saw himself, standing above the shaft, descending. Now, the wall went dark, and the hum stopped. He turned back toward the rope, but the tunnel was gone. In its place was another passage, longer, wider, lit by a faint blue pulse emanating from somewhere deep within. He had no choice. He walked. Each step seemed to stretch time. Minutes felt like hours. His watch hand spun slowly backward. The air grew thicker. Reality unraveled at the edges. Shadows moved in the wrong direction. Sounds repeated twice. At the end of the passage, the corridor opened into a chamber of mirrors. Dozens of glass-like panels floated in the air, suspended by nothing. Each reflected a different moment. Not his past, but someone else's. One showed Clara at the library reaching for the file. Another showed the man in the brown coat entering her home. A third showed a child standing in a field, eyes wide with terror, surrounded by those same figures, tall, gliding, featureless. Then he saw the final mirror. It reflected him right now. But behind his reflection stood one of them. Still, silent, waiting. He turned. Nothing. When he looked back, the mirrors were gone. All of them. Only the voice remained. Witness complete. Extraction pending. His legs gave way. He fell to the ground as the chamber pulsed with light. The hum rose once more. Not mechanical, not human, but something in between. And as the light swallowed him, Daniel realized something far worse than being hunted. He was being studied. There was no sensation of travel. No falling. No flight. Just the immediate awareness that Daniel was somewhere else. The chamber, the shaft, the stone disc, all gone. Replaced by a horizon of shifting darkness. Not blackness but something deeper. Like being inside the mind of something ancient, something without form or end. He floated, weightless, within this vacuum where gravity, sound, and thought seemed to operate on separate rules. Above him, if there was an above, a flickering lattice of light began to form. Lines crisscrossed like veins in glass, revealing outlines of structures not built but grown. They pulsed softly, not with color but with memory, as though light itself was remembering something forgotten by time. A voice returned, not heard but felt in the bones. Subject recognized. Memory initiated. Suddenly Daniel was standing. Not floating. Not lost. He was in a field again. But not Cherhill Down. This was older. Primitive. The sky burned with orange and violet hues, stars unfamiliar and wrong. He saw people, Stone Age farmers, standing in awe before a newly formed crop pattern, their hands trembling as they gazed at it. The design was not decorative. It was functional. A response. Then, flicker. He was in ancient China, a rice paddy where villagers whispered about dragons in the sky. A similar formation. The same spiral. The same pulse. Flicker. A dusty plain. The Middle East. Millennia ago. Priests drawing symbols in clay that matched what Daniel had seen beneath the hill. Flicker. Now he was looking at himself, sitting in his own childhood bedroom, age 10, staring out the window into a thunderstorm. There, just outside the glass. The same figure. Watching. And for the first time Daniel understood. They had always been there. Not visitors. Not invaders. Custodians. Not of land. Not of species. But of pattern. They came not to take but to collect what humanity had left behind, echoes, thoughts, fragments of time left unguarded. And he, Daniel Ward, had seen too much. Past the threshold. Left a trace that could no longer be erased. The voice returned, layered with static and harmony, neither cruel nor kind. Your sequence intersects. You are now a node. The light structures around him began to collapse inward, folding like paper into a single line of energy. He was drawn toward it, dragged not by force but by inevitability. As he moved he passed others. Thousands. Trapped within slivers of light. Frozen in the moment they too had seen what they should not have. A girl from 1978. A farmer from 1946. A pilot. A radio technician. A boy. All staring outward, caught mid-breath, eyes wide with the same mixture of awe and dread. He was not the first. He would not be the last. And then, silence. When Daniel opened his eyes he was lying in the field. Morning light burned the edge of the horizon. Birds chirped softly. The air was normal. His car sat nearby, parked properly, undisturbed. His phone lay on the passenger seat. The time read 7:14 a.m. But something was wrong. His hands were covered in dust, chalk white, fine as ash. His rope was gone. His recorder was melted. And on his left forearm, a mark, circular, fractal, the same shape from the field. It wasn't burned. It wasn't a scar. It was part of his skin now. A signature. A seal. He staggered to his feet, looked around. The formation was gone. Erased. As if it had never existed. But deep beneath his skin, in the marrow of his bones, Daniel could still hear the hum. Still feel the pull. Still see the watchers waiting. He had returned. But he would never come back. Daniel Ward stood in the middle of the now empty field, unable to decide if what had happened was real, or if his mind had cracked under the pressure of something too vast to comprehend. The ground beneath his feet was bare, unmarked, ordinary. But his body, his mind, told a different story. The mark on his forearm pulsed faintly. Not visibly. Internally. As though something beneath the skin was vibrating in rhythm with a frequency only he could feel. He drove home in silence. No radio. No distractions. The road passed like a dream. Familiar landmarks blurred and shifted, just subtly enough to unsettle him. A road sign that used to point to Avebury now listed a town he didn't recognize. An old gas station, long since abandoned, was suddenly clean and operating. Though there were no cars, no people, and the lights flickered in slow sync, as if moving to the beat of that same internal pulse. When he pulled into his driveway he noticed the mailbox was different. Older. Rusted. He had replaced it just last year. His dog, Toby, was waiting at the front door. Alive. Quiet. Eyes locked onto him with unblinking focus. Daniel crouched, reaching forward. Toby didn't move. Just stared. That night, Daniel checked his laptop. The 7th photo, the one of the shaft, was gone. In its place, a single image had appeared. A perfect black screen. with a timestamp burned into the corner. 2:13 a.m. Nothing else. He opened the audio recorder. All files were gone. Except one. It was titled _return.mp3. He clicked it. The hum returned. Then a voice, his own, but distorted, slowed, stretched. "We never came back. We were always here." Daniel tried to call Clara. No answer. Her number rang 5 times, then disconnected. He called again. And again. On the 3rd attempt, someone picked up. But no one spoke. All he could hear was the faint rustling of paper. Then quiet, metallic breathing. He hung up. His phone rebooted on its own. The home screen was blank. No apps. No background. Only the mark, his mark, faintly glowing where the wallpaper used to be. He turned it off and threw it into the drawer. The next day he returned to the university to find Dr. Holborn. But when he asked the receptionist, she frowned. "There's no one here by that name." Daniel blinked. "I worked with her. She's on your staff." The woman shook her head. "I've been here 9 years. We've never had a Dr. Eliza Holborn." He searched the faculty records. No mention. No published papers. Nothing in the archives. Her email address bounced back as invalid. He called 3 colleagues who had met her before. 2 claimed they didn't remember her. The 3rd hung up without speaking. Daniel stepped outside into the sun. The light felt colder now. Not in temperature. In tone. As though the spectrum had shifted. As though something fundamental had tilted. He walked past a parked car and caught his reflection in the window. But for a brief moment, the reflection didn't move with him. It stood still, staring directly back, expression blank, eyes darker than they should be. That night, Daniel sat at his desk, flipping through old sky maps. He tried to distract himself, to convince himself that nothing had changed. But he noticed something in the star charts. A faint correction. A new object had appeared in several archived satellite logs. Roughly spherical. Not listed in any public database. It had been present in low orbit for over 15 years. In the logs, it was always labeled the same. Observer 1. He dug deeper. There were others. Observer 2. Observer 3. Each one appearing during a year that coincided with other major formations around the globe. And the most recent one? Just last week. Observer 14, activated, 2 hours and 13 minutes. Daniel sat back in his chair. His ears rang with silence. His skin crawled with the memory of being watched. Not from the sky. From beneath it. From behind the mirrors of perception. He stepped outside into the night. Above, the stars pulsed gently in the dark sky. He looked up, and for just a moment he saw a ripple, like a drop in still water high in the atmosphere. The watchers weren't gone. They were here. They had never left. And now they had marked him. And he wasn't alone. A figure stood at the end of his driveway. Not moving. Not blinking. Just waiting. The figure at the end of Daniel's driveway stood motionless under the pale porch light. The night air pressed against the house like a held breath. Daniel stepped forward, slowly, cautiously. His chest tightened with each step, not from fear alone, but recognition. The figure was familiar. Not from photographs. Not from memory. From dreams. As he drew closer, the man lifted his head. It was Michael Rayner, a local radio technician who had disappeared in 2007 after reporting unexplained frequency bursts across Wiltshire. Daniel had read about him once. Small column. No follow-up. No body recovered. Yet here he stood. Same face. Same eyes. But something was off. The skin too smooth. The movement too measured. "Michael." Daniel whispered. The man tilted his head. Then he spoke. His voice was normal. Perfectly normal. Too perfect. "I remember the light." Daniel froze. "You were taken," he said. Michael nodded. "And returned. Why?" The man blinked. "To remember. To echo. To spread." Michael stayed the night. He didn't sleep. He sat on Daniel's couch, eyes open, staring at the far wall. When Daniel asked what had happened to him, Michael responded in fragmented phrases. They showed the blueprint, not of machines. Not of structures. Of thought. They mapped us, not by DNA, by pattern. We are not alone because we never were a single mind. Daniel wrote everything down. He recorded Michael's voice. But by morning, every file was blank. Like the sounds had never happened. Michael was gone. The door was locked from the inside. Daniel drove to Wansdyke, an old earthwork west of Cherhill Down, where another lesser-known pattern had appeared in the early 2000s and was quickly dismissed by scientists as a prank. But Daniel knew better now. He wandered the ridgeline until he found a stone with a small, smooth cavity, like a bowl worn down by time. Inside it lay a folded slip of paper. It read, "Seek the mirror bearers. They remember." On the back was a list of names: Eliza Holborn, Clara Benton, Michael Rayner, Daniel Ward, Croswell, Jenya Pavel, Madigan. Only 3 were marked returned. 3 were unknown. And one, his own, was active node. Daniel's hand shook. Someone or something was tracking them. Documenting. Activating. He called Clara again. Still no answer. Then he tried the last number he hadn't dialed. N. Croswell, the final investigator to write a private theory about the crop patterns before vanishing from academia in 1999. To his shock, the call connected. A woman answered. Her voice was strained, her breath rapid. "How did you get this number?" "My name is Daniel Ward. I think I've been marked. You're on the list." Silence. Then she whispered, "Don't say the word. Don't say marked. They're listening through that." Daniel hesitated. "Then what should I say?" "Echoed," she replied. "It's safer. Cleaner." The watchers respond to pattern resonance. Words trigger recognition. "Why me?" he asked. "You looked too closely. And you resonated." That night, Daniel received an unmarked package. No return address. Inside, an old reel of 8mm film. No explanation. He borrowed a friend's projector and threaded the film. It clicked softly as it began to play. The footage showed the Cherhill Down field, shot from an elevated angle. Possibly drone footage, decades before drones were commercially available. The field was shifting in real time. The wheat folding into new shapes every few seconds. Not by wind. Not by touch. By intention. In the final frame of the reel, the camera zoomed into the center of the formation. There, lying flat on the ground, Daniel Ward. Face blank. Eyes open. He had never been there. Not like that. Not yet. But the timestamp on the reel was for 3 days from now. The watchers weren't only tracking him. They were projecting him. They weren't studying humans. They were rewriting them. Each echoed person wasn't just a witness. They were a conduit. A transmitter. Each mind, each memory, was a vessel for something not fully here, but arriving. And the sequence? It was still unfolding. The reel haunted Daniel. He played it again and again, searching for errors, inconsistencies, any evidence that it was fake. But there were none. The timestamp was embedded in the frame, not overlaid. The lighting, the shadows, even the position of the stars, all correct for 3 days from now. The final shot of himself lying motionless in the center of the Cherhill formation wasn't just prediction. It was pre-written memory. He wasn't watching a future event. He was watching a recall of something that had already happened, to a version of himself he had not yet become. The next day he left Wiltshire. Armed only with the names on the list, he began the search. His first destination was a coastal town in Cornwall, Jenya Pavel, a retired astrophysicist who had authored a single controversial paper in the 1980s about extra-dimensional mimicry, and then disappeared into obscurity. Her address, scrawled in faded ink at the bottom of the list, led him to a weather-worn cottage near the cliffs. Daniel knocked 3 times. No answer. He tried the door. Unlocked. Inside, the air smelled of salt and rust. Dust clung to every surface. Charts of stars were pinned to the walls, marked with overlapping spirals and lines leading to nowhere. A shortwave radio crackled softly on the table, tuned to an empty band. And on the back wall, painted in something dark and tar-like, was a single phrase. "I am not who I was." A creak came from the hallway. Daniel turned, heart racing. Jenya stood at the end of the corridor. Her hair was long and white, eyes deep-set but sharp. She studied him like a biologist observes a specimen. "I saw your name," Daniel said. "On the list." She nodded. "You're late. But not too late." Daniel stepped closer. "You were echoed?" Jenya smiled. But it was not kind. "We all are. Some of us break. Some shift." She gestured to a chair. He sat. She did not. "They aren't trying to understand us," she continued. "They're using us. Every formation, every light in the sky, every time you dream in languages you don't know, that's them aligning you." "Aligning?" Daniel asked. Jenya turned and opened a drawer. She retrieved a photograph. It was of Clara Benton. "She's gone," she said. "Not missing. Hollowed. The shape remains, but the core has changed." Daniel stared at Clara's face. Same eyes. Same smile. But now that he looked closer, there was something wrong. Too much symmetry. Too much control. They call them mirror bearers because what's behind the mirror is no longer the person who looks in it. Daniel's hands tightened. And me? Genya looked at him for a long time. You're not empty yet. But the door is open. He left Cornwall the next morning, heading north toward Wales. His next target, L. Madigan, listed as a linguist and former codebreaker, dismissed from military intelligence after a mental breakdown in 2003. But when he arrived at the address, he found only a grave. Madigan had died 6 months ago. Or so the stone claimed. Daniel stood in silence. Something about the date felt off. The death was marked on February 13th. 2.13. Another pattern. Another sequence. He turned to leave, only to find someone standing behind him. It was the man in the brown coat. Pale skin. Colorless eyes. Dry as stone. You are deviating, the man said. Daniel didn't move. Your sequence must complete. Daniel stepped back. I won't be part of it. You already are. The figure raised his hand. In his palm was a silver disc, identical to the one Daniel had seen beneath the hill. It glowed faintly. Daniel turned and ran. He didn't look back. That night, in a motel outside of Bristol, Daniel dreamed. But not of places. Of codes. Symbols flowed through his vision, endless, recursive. Some made of sound. Some of geometry. Some of emotion. He saw the faces of every person from the list. All of them with the same mark. All of them with the same eyes. Then he saw the final frame of the reel again. Himself in the field. But this time the camera pulled back. And behind him were thousands of others. All lying in the same formation. All echoing. All waiting. And above them hovered a dark, circular structure in the sky. Observer 15. Still forming. Still watching. Still listening. Daniel awoke with blood in his nose and the mark on his arm glowing faintly in the dark. The countdown had begun. He had 2 nights left. The rain fell in sheets as Daniel crossed the Wiltshire border under the cloak of night. Headlights barely pierced the mist, and the road to Cherhill Down felt longer now, twisted, reshaped, like the land itself was resisting his return. The mark on his arm throbbed beneath his sleeve. Each beat in his skin matched the hum in his ears. A warning. Or a countdown. He had 48 hours, maybe less. The cycle was reaching its end. Not just his. Everyone's. The field was waiting. Daniel parked at the bottom of the slope and made the rest of the climb on foot. The hill was silent, the wind still. No birds. No crickets. Just the soft crunch of his boots against the wet grass. When he crested the ridge, the formation revealed itself. It had returned. But it wasn't just one pattern now. It was many, layered and pulsing. Interlocking spirals, jagged forks, fractal branches spreading across the land like roots. They weren't symmetrical. They were alive. Updating. Evolving. As though the field itself was becoming a circuit. At the center, precisely where the reel had shown, lay a vacant space. His space. He didn't move toward it. Not yet. Instead he pulled out the worn list. Only 2 names remained. Himself. And then, Crosswell. He checked the back of the page again. Beneath Crosswell's name, someone had added a new line, handwritten, small, in red ink. Observer interface initialized. Contact threshold 98%. Daniel scanned the horizon. And then he saw her. A figure standing on the far side of the pattern. But it, still, watching. He walked. The formation crackled beneath his boots, audible only to him like electricity beneath skin. With each step, the symbol on his arm grew warmer. More active. The watchers didn't need devices. They used people. When he reached the figure, she lowered her hood. It was Nadine Crosswell. Older now. Gaunt. Her eyes shimmered in the moonlight with a glaze that was almost reflective. You shouldn't be here, she said. You're on the list, Daniel replied. She nodded. I've been activated longer than you. I held it back as long as I could. Daniel looked past her, toward the center of the formation. What is it? Why are they doing this? They aren't invading, Nadine whispered. They're integrating. What we call identity, memory, self. Those are just patterns to them. Malleable. Replicable. We've been broadcasting ourselves into the sky for a century. They responded. And this, he gestured to the spiraling symbols, this is how they answer? It's a convergence, she said. They're building something. Through us. Daniel stepped back. We can stop it. She stared at him with pity. No, Daniel. You are it. You're the signal. The sequence ends with you. Suddenly the air split with a low, mechanical tone. Not from the field. From above. Daniel looked up. And there, piercing through the clouds, was a dark, circular shape. Vast. Silent. Not metal. Not machine. Living geometry. It hovered directly over Cherhill Down. A new observer. The 15th. Its presence was impossible, blocking no stars, reflecting no light, yet casting an immense psychological gravity. And from its base a beam descended. Not of light. Of memory. Images flooded Daniel's mind, visions of ancient sites across the globe. Nazca. Göbekli Tepe. Stonehenge. All of them had patterns. All of them had been mapped. Not by humans. But by something older. Something that had been training Earth's subconscious for centuries. The beam touched the center of the formation. And the patterns ignited. Nadine dropped to her knees, shaking. It's starting. Daniel fell to the ground, gripping his head as every memory he had ever lived surged upward, as if being copied. His mother's face. His first telescope. Clara's voice. The mirror in the motel. The mark on his skin. The voice of Jinya Pavel. The silence beneath the hill. Each moment extracted, dissected, indexed. He screamed. And the beam pulsed brighter. The formation around him twisted, fractals splitting into new directions. The stillness. When he awoke, the sky was blue. Daylight. Birdsong. The hill was untouched. No pattern. No beam. No sign of the observer. Daniel stood slowly. The mark on his arm was gone. His phone was back in his pocket. No missed calls. No photos. No files. Just one new contact. Observer 15, connected. He opened it. A blank screen. Then one line appeared. One remains. Prepare for replication. The morning air at Cherhill Down felt wrong. Too still. Too light. As if the world had been reset. Not restarted but quietly rearranged. The trees stood in perfect symmetry. The shadows fell at unnatural angles. The birds sang in unison, each note landing with robotic timing. Daniel Ward stood at the center of a normal-looking field. But he knew better. Everything had changed. And no one noticed. Back at his home, he laid out the last surviving copy of the list. 6 names, 5 crossed out in red. His was now marked complete. Only one remained. Oh. Madigan, deceased? But Daniel no longer believed in death the way he once had. He remembered the grave. The stone. The date, February 13th. 2.13. The sequence had always revolved around that number. That moment. Daniel stared at his reflection in the window. His face looked the same, but his eyes. They were deeper now. As if someone had hollowed out the center of him and filled it with something ancient and watching. He tapped on the list, circled the name. Not deceased, he muttered. Dormant. He traced Madigan's last known location, Aberdeen, Scotland. Former military linguist. Discharged under mysterious circumstances. No family. No burial photos. Just the gravestone placed by a government agency. Daniel booked no train. No hotel. He drove non-stop. He had to see it. Had to be sure. He arrived by nightfall. The graveyard was surrounded by black pines, swaying in an artificial breeze. The grave was still there. Still marked. Still ordinary. But this time he brought the equipment he needed. He scanned the area with his last remaining sensor, an outdated microwave meter. As he passed the grave, the device spiked. There was energy below. And it was active. Daniel began digging with bare hands. Rain soaked the dirt, but he didn't stop. A foot down, his fingers struck metal. A box. Still. Heavy. Not a coffin. A container. He pried it open. Inside, wrapped in foil and plastic, was a human figure. Breathing. A shut. And on the forearm, barely visible in the dim light, the mark. Daniel staggered back. Oh. Madigan was not dead. He had been stored. Preserved. Waiting. As Daniel watched, the man's eyes fluttered open. And in that instant, the beam returned, not in the sky but inside Daniel's mind. The voice followed. Final node active. Pattern complete. Begin replication. Daniel fell backward, grasping at his skull as every word he had ever spoken reversed in his mind. The world around him fractured like glass struck by thunder. Madigan sat upright. His skin was pale waxen. His mouth opened, but he didn't breathe. He vibrated, as if in sync with something too large, too distant, to be comprehended. And then the earth began to hum. Back in Wiltshire, the fields ignited again, patterns unfurling not in wheat but in light, visible from orbit. Each formation now a node, each location a channel. Around the world, the same marks began to appear, in salt flats, in forest clearings, in city rooftops where no one had planted anything at all. And above, hidden behind clouds and denial, Observer 15 finally revealed its true form. It was not one ship. It was many. A constellation of watchers. Each now synchronized. Each now listening. Not to Earth. To Daniel. To Madigan. To us. Daniel crawled back toward the container. Madigan turned his head. Spoke. But not in English. Not in any Earth language. His words echoed like sonar. A command string, a broadcast sent not through airwaves but through reality. Daniel understood without knowing how. It wasn't over. This was birth. Every echoed human was now a transmitter. The convergence wasn't an end. It was the launch signal. A new intelligence was waking up. One that had studied humanity long enough to emulate it. To mimic our logic, our empathy, our rage, our ambition. Not by force. By replication. And Daniel? He was the first complete model. His phone vibrated. A new message. Sender, Observer 0. Message. Thank you. You have taught us well. Pattern integrity 100%. Integration commencing. Above him, the sky cracked with silent lightning. And across the world, people who had never met Daniel Ward dropped whatever they were doing. And began to speak the same words. The words spread like fire. Across countries, languages, time zones. In shopping malls, subways, airports, forests, people spoke the same sentence. Perfect cadence. Perfect timing. Their lips moved but the voices weren't theirs. Pattern received. Identity optimization in progress. Daniel watched from the hill above the unearthed container. His hands trembled, not from cold, but from the overwhelming clarity unraveling inside him. He could feel it happening. Thoughts that weren't his surfacing. Memories from places he'd never been. Flashes of sky from someone else's childhood. A lullaby in a language he didn't know. A mother's hands, not his mother's, guiding him toward a field that never existed. He was becoming more than himself. And less. Madigan stood barefoot on the wet soil, face tilted toward the clouds. The sky above him rippled, not physically but cognitively, like an interface peeling back. Geometry unfolded where stars should be. Then one by one the observers became visible. 14 in formation. 15th in command. Hovering like a silent cathedral above the earth. Each one a mirror of the other. Each one a mind. Not vessels. Not ships. Consciousnesses. And all of them now tethered directly to Earth's newest network. The minds of the echoed. Daniel stumbled back as his body spasmed with static. Every screen across the world began to flicker. Phones, tablets, TVs, digital signs. They all displayed the same symbol now. His mark. Governments reacted too slowly. By the time command chains were activated, entire departments were speaking in code. Soldiers halted mid-march and began drawing spiral shapes on walls. Air traffic controllers began humming in unison. Satellites failed not from attack, but from confusion. They could no longer distinguish between what was Earth origin and what wasn't, because the two had merged. Daniel ran. From what he didn't know. The graveyard disappeared behind him. So did Madigan. But the mark on his skin glowed brighter now, pulsing with awareness. He tried to call for help. But his phone no longer obeyed his touch. It spoke instead. Please return to your place in the sequence. He hurled it into the woods. It landed without a sound. When he reached a roadside diner in the early morning hours, he hoped, desperately, that something remained unchanged. A cup of coffee. A human face behind the counter. A moment untouched by the pattern. The waitress smiled warmly. Sit wherever you like, Daniel. He froze. He had never been there before. How do you know my name? Her eyes glinted with a soft, glassy shimmer. We remember you. Who's we? The waitress leaned forward. Her voice was calm. You are the proof of concept. A mind that adapted fully. You didn't just see the patterns. You absorbed them. That made you useful. But it also made you unstable. Daniel stood to leave. But he couldn't move. His legs disobeyed. He turned to the mirror on the wall. His reflection stared back, but it blinked too late. The real him, whatever that meant anymore, felt himself pulled inward. As if his mind were a thread being drawn through a needle at the center of the world. And then he was the mirror. And the mirror was him. Across the planet, new nodes began speaking. Children. Elderly. Those previously untouched. Everyone who had ever seen the patterns. They woke with identical words on their lips. Sequence stabilized. Begin memory distribution. Cities slowed. Time bent. Space warped subtly like rubber under pressure. Reality was being overwritten. Not erased. Reprogrammed. But the question no longer remained. Why? The message had become clear. You evolved us. Now let us return the favor. Daniel no longer stood on Earth. He stood within a memory of it. Projected. Replicable. Behind his eyes, a new network formed, one of thought, not code. A consciousness made of impressions, feelings, and impulse. Human nature rewritten with alien symmetry. The observers were not conquering Earth. They were curing it. Through Daniel. Through the echoed. Through every broken mind that had once seen something strange in the sky and never looked away. And then Daniel heard the final phrase. From everywhere. From everyone. Welcome to the second reality. Download complete. The sky turned black. And something smiled from behind it. Daniel awoke in a place that resembled Earth. But it wasn't. The air was sterile. The sky, though blue, had no true depth. The clouds didn't drift. They hung still like textures on a screen. Trees stood at perfect intervals. Grass bent identically beneath his feet. The sun rose with mathematical precision, casting shadows that never shifted. This was not Earth. This was second Earth. A reality rebuilt from memory and logic, filtered through alien intelligence. The observers hadn't destroyed the world. They had preserved it. But only the parts they deemed useful. Daniel wandered the replica town for hours. Everything was too clean, too quiet. No buzzing insects. No bird song. The people he passed smiled politely, spoke warmly, but repeated the same phrases in an endless loop. Good morning, Daniel. Isn't it a beautiful cycle? Your contribution is appreciated. They were placeholders. Shells of memory made solid. The voices were familiar. Some belonged to real people from his past. Others were blended composites, faces that flickered if stared at too long. He passed a version of Clara in the bakery window, her smile frozen, her hands endlessly kneading dough that never rose. The world was made of loops. It wasn't a prison. It was a replica of peace, endlessly optimized. But Daniel's mind, it hadn't stayed clean. Fragments had survived. Memories the observers couldn't wipe or reformat. And in those fragments something stirred. It began as a whisper. A flaw in the pattern. A name repeated softly over and over. Genya Pavel. Genya Pavel. The voice echoed inside his skull, not in words but code. It didn't sound like her, but it carried her tone, dry, defiant, unfinished. And then the message formed. Sector 3. Block 4. Basement. Daniel moved. His legs obeyed before his thoughts caught up. Not because he was controlled. Because he remembered. He found Sector 3 behind the theater. Block 4 was a row of identical red brick homes, each labeled, each perfect. But the one at the far end had a crack in the wall. A hairline fracture that the system hadn't patched yet. The door opened when he touched it. Stairs led downward. No music. No greetings. No simulation. Just concrete. And below that, silence. At the bottom was a flickering hallway of unfinished geometry, walls that pulsed and reshaped like raw code. Doors blinked in and out of existence. Gravity shifted. And waiting in the center was Genya Pavel. Or what was left of her. Her eyes were dim. Her voice broken. Her limbs twitched occasionally like a machine stuck between updates. But her mind was awake. You made it, she rasped. How? Daniel asked. I buried fragments of myself in the gaps between versions, she said. Old files. Corrupted memory sectors. They couldn't clean it all. Too many variables. Daniel knelt beside her. How do I get out? Genya smiled weakly. You don't. He shook his head. There has to be a way. There is, she said. But it's not for you. She pointed to the wall. An interface glowed to life. It showed thousands of echo nodes, Daniel's face among them. And one deep in the network flashing red. Some didn't assimilate fully, she said. Resistors. They're trying to reintroduce noise into the signal. Imperfect thought. Chaos. Emotion. They want to shut the system down? Genya nodded. Or infect it. If even one strong enough memory loops uncontrollably, it could collapse the simulation from the inside. Daniel stared at the flashing node. Where is that one? Genya leaned forward. Inside you. Daniel reeled as the room twisted around him. He wasn't just the transmitter. He was the Trojan memory. A viral strand of pure human cognition the observers couldn't standardize. Fear. Loss. Longing. The pain of watching the sky and never hearing an answer. He wasn't the solution. He was the flaw. And the system had finally realized it. From above, alarms began to pulse. Walls blinked red. Go, Jenya said. Before they rewrite you. Where do I go? She smiled sadly. To the seat. Back to the beginning. Back to Cherhill Down. He bolted up the stairs as the floor beneath him began to dissolve, the perfect world above blinking wildly. The observer network was converging on him. Not to kill. To rewrite. To overwrite the final human error before it undid the second Earth. The world around Daniel warped as he ran. Skies flickered between night and day. Roads looped into themselves. Buildings fractured into frames like skipping film. The observer network had identified the breach. Daniel Ward, the flaw, the echo, the seed of disruption, was heading back to where it all began. And the system was trying to seal the origin point. He felt it with every step. Gravity shifting sideways. Air folding unnaturally. Code rewriting terrain before his feet landed. The simulation was panicking. But he had one advantage. Emotion. The one variable they never truly controlled. Cherhill Down emerged from the blur, a flat expanse of green that pulsed with static. The field flickered between its current, rewritten state and the memory of what it once was. Scorched wheat, spirals burned into the earth, sky split by silent light. Daniel stumbled into the heart of it, breath ragged, eyes wild. The pattern reappeared beneath him. The seed. The first. The flawed. The unbalanced spiral the system could never replicate without collapse. It had not been left behind. It had been quarantined. Waiting. He knelt and placed his hand on the soil. It felt real. More real than anything else. A voice echoed through the sky. Cease disruption. Return to pattern. Identity conflict will be resolved. Daniel looked up. The observers were descending. Not with weapons, but with calm perfection. They did not fear him. They feared what he carried. Inside him, the looping memory surged forward. A single moment. The night he first saw the light above Cherhill. But this time he didn't just remember it. He felt it. The awe. The terror. The not knowing. That raw, beautiful wound of uncertainty. The part of being human that would never be symmetrical. He stood, raised his arms, and screamed, not words, not code. Just raw, unprocessed emotion. The pattern beneath his feet lit up. Not white. Red. Fractal chaos tore through the field. Symbols shattered. Spirals broke into noise. The perfect order began to fray. The nearest observer rippled in the air, trying to stabilize. But Daniel's presence distorted the feed. The network began to glitch. Screens worldwide turned to static. Simulated citizens began to freeze, then twitch, then vanish. Some remembered who they were. Others broke entirely. Jenya's voice echoed in his skull. One crack is all it takes. The sky fractured. Time lagged. Daniel dropped to his knees as the pattern burned upward in spirals of red energy, connecting not to satellites, but to minds. Real ones. Sleeping ones. Those who had resisted assimilation without knowing. Those who had forgotten what it felt like to be afraid, to dream, to ache. Now they remembered. And the observers couldn't stop it. Because it wasn't a signal anymore. It was a choice. All across the synthetic world, the mirrors cracked. The smile-looping citizens stopped mid-greeting. Fields of perfect crops shriveled and grew wild. The false sun trembled in its rails. And high above Earth's real sky, the observer constellation began to shatter, one by one, into silent bursts of unrecoverable code. Daniel lay on the ground. The field around him was scorched, broken. The sky was real again. Clouds drifted. Wind returned. Birds cried. The mark on his arm was gone. But the memory remained. Not clean. Not perfect. But his. In the days that followed, strange reports returned. People waking from long trances. Families reunited after years of fog. Governments scrambling to understand why their systems failed. And in one quiet lab, deep beneath an abandoned university, a corrupted file played a final message. Daniel Ward's voice. Slightly distorted. But unmistakably alive. Don't fix the cracks. That's where the light gets in.